you ever felt like your life just isn't moving forward? Like no matter how much you want to progress, something is holding you back? Maybe you're in a season of waiting, waiting for an opportunity, waiting for clarity, or waiting for something to change. Or maybe you've just stopped moving because you feel exhausted, uncertain, or even afraid. Welcome to Q on Q. We're glad you're with us this week. We're in our second week of a series called Shifting Gears. And today, in our second episode of the series, we're talking about what it means to be in park. Is it a time of necessary rest, a season of preparation, or have you been stuck in a place for too long? When we talked about being in reverse, we talked about how dwelling in the past can prevent us from moving forward. But park is different. Unlike reverse, which is about constantly looking backward, park can sometimes be necessary. In a car, park is there for a reason. You can't leave a vehicle running indefinitely, and you can't step out while the car is still rolling. You need a safe moment to pause, refuel, or make adjustments before continuing your journey. The same is true in life. There are seasons where stopping is wise, even sometimes essential. But here's where I want to focus on today. Park isn't meant to be a permanent state. Sometimes we mistake park for progress. We think that staying put will protect us from mistakes or failures, but the reality is being in park for too long can lead to complacency or fear or missed opportunities. On the other hand, there are times when we're in a waiting season and it's exactly where we need to be. The challenge is, can we recognize the difference? Are we resting and waiting with purpose, or are we stuck out of fear, uncertainty, or comfort? Throughout this episode, we're going to explore these different aspects of being in park. We'll look at the difference between healthy waiting and being stuck. We're going to talk about examples of people who had to wait before stepping into their purpose, like Joseph, who spent years in prison before becoming a leader, and David, who was anointed a king but had to wait before ruling. We're going to discuss the dangers of staying in park too long, when waiting turns into hesitation, and when that hesitation turns into inaction. As you listen this week, I want you to reflect on where you are right now. Think in your own mind how park can apply to you. Are you in a season where you'd rather be moving? Maybe you're resting. Maybe you're allowing yourself to refuel before the next step. Maybe you're waiting on an answer, an opportunity, or a breakthrough. Or maybe you feel like you've been sitting still for too long and you're just unsure of how to get moving again. My hope is that by the end of this episode, you will have a better sense of whether you need to stay in park a little longer or it's time to shift into gear. So let's dive in. What's the real purpose of being in park in our lives? And how do we know when it's time to start moving again? Well, in life, movement is often celebrated. Progress, action, success, forward momentum are all seen as signs of good things. But what if sometimes the best thing you can do is just stop and pause? Just like a car needs to be put in park to rest safely, people also need moments of stillness. These pauses aren't about laziness and certainly not about failure. They're about restoration, reflection, and preparation for what's ahead. Without them, we risk burnout, rash decisions, maybe even missed opportunities for growth. Think about the way athletes train. They push their bodies to the limit, but they also build in intentional rest days. Without rest, their muscles don't recover and their performance suffers. The same is true in life. If we never allow ourselves to slow down, we might be moving, but not necessarily in the right direction or at the pace we're supposed to be going. Sometimes, God, or life itself, places us in a season of stillness, not to hold us back, but to prepare us for what's next. I think there are different kinds of park moments. Some are chosen, like taking a vacation or a sabbatical from work, or stepping away from a stressful situation, or intentionally pausing to reflect on what really matters. Other times, Stillness is forced upon us, maybe through a job loss or an illness or a door that simply won't open no matter how hard we try. In those moments, it's easy to feel frustrated or stuck. But what if that pause is actually protection? What if park is exactly where we need to be? And while they might seem similar on the surface, understanding the difference between these two can help us respond in the right way. Because when we misinterpret our season, we can either rush ahead too soon or stay parked for too long. Faith teaches us that waiting isn't always wasted time. Scripture's filled with examples of people who had to wait before stepping into their purpose. Look at the story of Joseph, one of the most familiar stories of the scriptures. Joseph was literally sold into slavery and spent years and years in prison before he eventually became a leader in Egypt. What about David? David was anointed as a king, but he didn't take the throne immediately. He spent years on the run, growing into the leader he was meant to be. Even Jesus spent 30 years in preparation before beginning his public ministry. These waiting seasons weren't detours, they were times of refining, strengthening, and deepening trust. But park isn't just about waiting, it's also about resting. In today's world, where busyness is often worn as a badge of honor, rest can feel counterproductive sometimes. But rest is actually one of the most powerful things we can do. When we pause, we create space for clarity. We allow ourselves to hear what we might have missed in the noise of constant movement, whether it's through prayer, meditation, journaling, or simply being still. Moments of park can help us reconnect with what truly matters. You see, rest is intentional. It's when we deliberately pause to recharge, recover, and refocus. Just like our bodies need sleep to function well, our minds and our hearts need moments of quiet to process life. Rest should never be seen as laziness. It's actually a crucial part of growth. We can't always be in motion. Sometimes we need to step back, breathe, and allow ourselves to regain our strength. That's not just physically, that's mentally and even sometimes spiritually too. These pauses are not just beneficial, they are essential. Waiting, on the other hand, is about anticipation. It's when we're ready to move forward, but the timing isn't right yet. And that can be kind of unsettling at times. Think of a stoplight. You're in position, you know where you're headed, but the light is red. Well, you don't turn off the engine and walk away, you stay ready. Some of us more ready than others to put the pedal to the floor and get through that light. But waiting can be frustrating because we don't always have control over how long it lasts. Often, waiting is where preparation happens. It's where we develop patience, we deepen our trust, and refine our direction. If we rush through a waiting season, we might step into something prematurely and miss what we were meant to gain in the process. So, I've mentioned two types of being in park so far. What if we feel like we're in the third category? Being stuck. Being stuck isn't rest, and it's not waiting with purpose. It's when we're paralyzed by fear, uncertainty, or comfort. It's when we make excuses for not moving forward. Unlike rest, which refreshes, or waiting, which builds patience, being stuck literally drains us. It leads to frustration, discouragement, sometimes even regret. It's the person who won't leave a job they hate because they're afraid of change. It's the dream that never gets pursued because the timing just isn't right. It's knowing we need to forgive, take a risk, or make a change, but we find every reason not to. The challenge is that being stuck can disguise itself as waiting. We tell ourselves, I'm just waiting for the right moment, or I'll start when I feel more ready. I just need one more confirmation before I take action. But if we're honest, Sometimes we're just avoiding what we know we need to do. And unlike waiting, which has an element of hope and expectation, being stuck feels heavy, discouraging, and sometimes endless. So, how do we tell the difference? How do we know if our season of being in park is one of rest, one of waiting, or just something we're stuck in? Well, one way is to ask yourself this question: is this season bringing me peace or frustration? Rest, even when it requires slowing down, brings peace. Waiting, though difficult, carries a sense of expectation and hope. But being stuck, it leaves us feeling restless, frustrated, or even trapped. Another way is to examine our mindset. If we're using waiting as an excuse, avoiding discomfort, or ignoring opportunities out of fear, we may not be waiting. We may be stuck by our own doing. The good news is that no season has to last forever. If you need rest, take it. If you're waiting, embrace it. And if you're stuck, well, it's time to start shifting gears. The first step might be small, but any movement is better than none. Whether it's seeking wise counsel, setting a goal, or simply choosing to let go of fear, the key is to recognize that park is a temporary position, not a permanent residence. Now, hear me out when I say this. There's nothing wrong with using park for its intended purpose, but staying in park too long becomes a problem. What starts as a season of rest or waiting can slowly turn into a season of stagnation if we let it. When we settle too deeply into our comfort, or we allow fear to take over, or we hesitate more times than we should, we risk missing out on what's ahead. Just like a car isn't meant to stay parked forever, neither are we. Lingering in park too long can lead to complacency. At first, we may have needed the break to catch our breath, to process something, or to prepare for the what's next. But if we're not careful, comfort can become a trap. It's easy to settle into routines that feel safe, even if they're not where we're meant to be. We might say, well, things are fine as they are. Why risk shaking things up? But staying in place just because it's comfortable doesn't mean it's right. I mentioned David earlier. A lot of 1st and 2nd Samuel in the scriptures cover David's story because there's so much to it. So many different seasons that he went through. Before he was king, he was a shepherd. That was his comfort zone. He had his routine, his skills, and a life he understood. But God had more for him. Imagine if David had stayed in the fields, tending sheep forever. He would have never stepped into his true calling. There's nothing wrong with being in a season of preparation, but eventually the moment comes when we have to step forward. The question is, will we? Also, sometimes it's not just comfort that keeps us parked, it's fear. Fear of failure, fear of change, fear of stepping into the unknown. We tell ourselves, what if I'll make a mistake? What if things don't work out? And so we stay where we are, not because it's best for us, but because it feels safer than taking a risk. But growth rarely happens when we're in our comfort zones. The greatest moments of transformation often begin when we step into the unknown. Picture somebody sitting in a parked car with the engine running. They've got the fuel, their destination is set, but they never shift into drive. They're using energy. They're burning fuel. They're wasting precious time. I'm sure they have a lot of thoughts going on in their heads, but they're going nowhere. That's what it looks like when we stay in park for too long. We might be busy thinking, planning, or analyzing, but at some point, movement is required. No amount of sitting and revving the engine is going to take us anywhere if we don't put the car in gear. And of course, moving forward doesn't mean we need to have everything figured out. Sometimes all it takes is a small step in the right direction. Think about kids who are just learning to drive for the first time. how much fear they might have to just put that car in drive and pick that foot up off the brake pedal. They don't have to push the gas and go right to 55 the first time. It just takes letting a little bit off the brake, giving it a little bit of gas to start moving, to start getting comfortable with it. And eventually, they're doing 70 down the expressway. If we wait till we feel 100% ready, we might never go anywhere. The key is recognizing when our season of stillness has served its purpose and when it's time to shift. It might not be easy and it might not be comfortable, but the road ahead is only reachable when we're willing to move. So if you're out there and you've been sitting in park longer than you should, I want to ask you a question. Have you been in park because you need to be there? Or are you in park because you're afraid to move forward? And I'm going to rephrase that question now so that you can ask yourself and make it personal. Am I where I am because I need to be or because I'm afraid to move forward? If it's fear holding you back, maybe it's time to take a deep breath, shift gears, and start driving toward what's next. Knowing when to stay in park and when to shift gears can be tricky. If you've been holding back because of fear, second guessing every decision, or making excuses for why you can't take action, it might be time to shift gears. Restlessness can be a sign of that. If you feel a persistent nudge that you're meant to do something different, it might be time to explore what that means. And when you've prayed about it, sought wise counsel, and still feel peace about moving forward, that's often confirmation it's time to take the next step. So, how do you shift out of park once you're ready? Well, my first go to, and I'd encourage it to be yours, is to start praying for clarity. Ask yourself honestly, am I truly waiting or am I hesitating? Sometimes we label fear as waiting on the right time, but we know we're just avoiding the change. Then seek some wise counsel. Talk to a pastor or mentors or friends or people who have walked a similar path. Sometimes an outside perspective can help you see what you might be missing. And most importantly, take a step, even a small one. As I said earlier, you don't have to push the gas pedal to the floor, just put the car in gear. Progress happens one movement at a time. Shifting gears isn't always a dramatic moment. It's often a quiet decision to stop lingering in hesitation. The key isn't to rush ahead without thought. It's to recognize when your season of stillness has done its job. Life isn't meant to be lived in neutral, and it's certainly not meant to be spent idling in park forever. If you sense that it's time to move, trust that you're ready, even if you don't feel like it yet. If you're in a season of stillness right now, it might feel like you're falling behind. But what if you're actually being positioned for something greater? What if this pause is the very thing that will allow you to step into your next season with greater strength and greater purpose? If you find yourself in park right now, don't rush to shift out of it, but shift out of it at some point. Take a moment. Ask yourself, what is this season teaching me that I'm in? Am I being given the chance to recharge, to reflect, or prepare for something ahead? If the stillness is necessary, embrace where you are right now, and it may be the best step forward you can take. If it's not, reflect on what is keeping you where you are. Are you in a season where rest is necessary? Maybe you've been running on empty and you need to give yourself permission to slow down. Or maybe you're in a waiting period where the next step isn't quite clear. Waiting with purpose can be an important part of the journey, but maybe you've realized you're stuck. Maybe fear, overthinking, or comfort has kept you in park longer. This week, I encourage you to take time to reflect. Ask yourself if you're waiting for the right reasons or if you're hesitating. If you're waiting, seek that wisdom and clarity that you need. You just might find you're ready to move forward. In our next episode, we're going to talk about that moving forward, drive, what it looks like to move forward with confidence and purpose. Shifting into drive doesn't mean reckless speed, but it does mean stepping forward in faith, making intentional choices, and trusting the path ahead. As you go through this week, wherever you are, resting, waiting, or feeling stuck, know that you're not alone. Every season has its purpose, but none of them are meant to last forever. Life is meant to be lived, and growth happens when we're willing to move. I pray you find the wisdom to know when to wait and the courage to move forward when the time is right. Till next time, keep your eyes ahead, be ready to shift gears when the moment comes. And as always, I really do appreciate you tuning in this week. We'll see you back here next time when we'll have more for you on cue.